Welcome back to the Daily Six, everybody, and a happy Friday morning, as happy as it can be given the context. All this week studying the sufferings of Job, a righteous man, as he wrestles with and we discover what's going on behind the scenes in the spiritual realms. Now, we're going to skip over chapter 3 through chapter 37 or so. Job and his friends are arguing about where is God in all of this, because we want to jump to God's answer. Can you get Job 38 open? And let's hear what the Lord has to say to us. Job 38. Come on with me. You certainly can't argue with Job and his friends for having this long wrestling match about where God is in all of this. Job's friends arguing, must be Job, you did something wrong. Job arguing, no, I'm innocent. This back and forth about whether God was being fair or not for Job's sufferings. You and I do the same thing, don't we? We go through hardships and we wonder, God, where are you? I've been doing my best to try to live for you. Well, God finally speaks out of the silence. Something that I know that you wish he would do. I know I wish he would do when I'm in hard times. And I think that we can let the word of the Lord be that voice to us if we will trust that God has revealed this on purpose, the living and active word revealed for you and me in our own struggles. Whether you could hear the voice of God directly for you or not, it's written, the voice of the Lord is here for you and me. You got Job 38 open? Let's look at God's response. Verse 1. The Lord answered Job out of the storm. Now, I might make a note here. Job probably had an emotional issue with storms. A storm had taken his family. And, well, God answers again through another storm. So in other words, the storm comes up and Job begins to hear the voice of the Lord, whatever form that took. And here's what God had to say, verse 2. Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. Now I'll question you, and you shall answer me. Man, I love this. Job and his friends have been battling and talking about God and wrestling about God, and God's like, who is it that's speaking without knowledge? And friends, isn't that you and me? That when we try to issue a charge against God, that God, you should be doing it this way, or why aren't you doing it this way? We are speaking without knowledge, and God says, brace yourselves. Let's have a conversation. Man up, brace yourself like a man, and I have some questions for you. Verse 4, first question God throws out. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? I mean, surely you know, right? Who stretched the measuring line across it? Or what on what were its footings set? Who laid the cornerstones? God's saying, in other words, were you around when I created everything? Do you have all this figured out? Verse 21, I love this. Surely you know all this, for you were already born, right? You've lived so many years. God's being a little sarcastic here and punching at him, right? Verse 24, what is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over all the earth? This here, God is speaking directly to what happened to Job's family and his possessions, a lightning storm and a windstorm. In other words, God's saying, Job, I know you're troubled by these things that happen, but do you know where they come from? Do you know where those are all stored up? Do you know how all this actually works? Now, here's the problem for us in our modern society. We think in all of our scientific awakenings and all of our enlightenment that we think we have figured out all these things, that we know how it all works. We may know the physics and the chemistry of how various atoms and molecules work and the physics of wind and motion and all this kind of stuff, but we still really don't know where all of this came from, and we don't know the forces that are behind the physics. I love God's answer to Job. Look down at verse 40, verse 1. Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer. In other words, God says, Job, do you understand all this? Speak up. And then Job's response, verse 3, Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I'll put a hand over my mouth. I've spoke once, but I have no answer, twice, but I'll say no more. Look down at chapter 42. Job replied to the Lord, God, I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is it that obscures my counsel without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things that are too wonderful for me to know. Now, friends, I would encourage you to spend some time reading God's answer, just over and over again, God speaking about all the various things that he created and saying, Job, do you understand how any of this works? And the reality is, no, of course I don't understand how this works. God never really gave Job an answer as to why. He just exposed to Job, you don't really know how all this works anyway, do you? And he left it a mystery. And Job had to say, you're right, God. I don't get it. Friends, I wonder if you could give God 6 more minutes. And I know that feels like this whole build, all this week said, boy, this feels really unsatisfactory. The bottom line answer is, I don't understand. But could you give God 6 minutes and worship him and acknowledge that you and me, we don't understand. There never will be an answer. We are disappointed with God. Of course we are. And God said, I can't really explain it. And if I could, you wouldn't get it then either. Give God 6 more minutes. Worship him. Surrender to him your understanding, your knowledge. Give God the permission to be God without needing us to correct him and guide him. Can you do that? Worship him and see what he has to say in response. And come back on Monday for more of the Daily Six. We're going to explore a whole another way that you and I can find rest and peace in the midst of all this stress that we're experiencing. Give God 6 more minutes. We'll see you Monday here on the Daily Six.